Everyone, and welcome back to One Mic Night, the next episode. My name is Marcos Luis. This is One Mic Night, the podcast that brings you stories of artists and people on their journey in entertainment and life, helping to guide, answer questions, and inspire your path in the business and the world. Today's guest is a musician, composer, a guitarist, and he is a plethora of knowledge. He's been in on the New York scene for a long time, and today he's going to share some stories. We're going to learn about his life, and it's going to inspire us in a different way. Please welcome my guest, Kyle Christian. What's up, Kyle?
Mr. Luis, what's happening, brother? How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, thank you. Welcome to One Mic Night Podcast. You I've known for a while, and you are... And I gotta say, man, you are an inspiration to me personally in the business. I remember one night you walked into One Mic Night and we were playing, and you're so humble, man. But you are, I consider, one of the greats in the business. So I want to back up for everybody, and I want to hear your story a little bit. So where are you from, first of
all? Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Moved to Bedford-Stuyvesant in 78. Was in Brooklyn, but we moved to that section of Brooklyn in 78.
Shout out to Brooklyn too. That's where we're doing the show from. Yeah.
Absolutely. Grew up on Bainbridge Street between what is now Malcolm X and Stuyvesant. Used to be Reed Avenue. And that was part of my earlier time in Bedford-Stuyvesant, going to school. School was right down the street, which was Martin DePorres, now some crazy high-priced condo now. If you ever walk through there, you'll see it. But I went to that school, and one of the teachers did teach us music in that school also. Mm-hmm. Music was in my household because realistically, my first guitar teacher, speaking of that, was really my mother. Because I used to watch my mother when I was a little guy, and she would play guitar and I would just be staring at her. So anytime she would put the guitar down, I would grab it and run around the house with it, just pulling on strings because I thought I was doing something.
That's interesting. Where did she get the musical knowledge from? Did her family play? Your whole family play?
My mother's side, I'm not too sure where it began for her. The lady I knew was my grandmother, I guess I can say maternal, so to speak, who raised my mother she was from the islands. Her name was Imogene Jandra. There was music within that household too, because we also grew up on a lot of times over on 60 Brooklyn Avenue, right off of Atlantic. You ever see that house over there? I grew up there. So that side of the family was music, but it was not discounting my mother's side of the family, but more so even more influential, my father's side of the family. My grandfather and my grandmother, my father's parents, were very heavy in the arts. My grandmother taught dance, tap, ballet, and she had various children in her class, and one of them was being Dawn Lewis, who wound up being Jaleesa on Different World, one of our early students.
Now, see, I'm thinking to myself, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's amazing. You have a family in the 70s growing up, all immersed in arts, tap dancing, music, Caribbean. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised because we're in Brooklyn. We're in New York.
Yeah. It was and I don't say this, I'll mention a little bit more about my grandfather in a brief moment, but I definitely don't say this out of any elite or egotistical or arrogant context, because there were a lot of families like that. And, when you grow up in that environment, sometimes you think that we got music in the house, we got albums, We got our own little personal record collections. Radio was still decent, well, really good at that time. That's the reason why Larry Graham made that song, "My Radio Sure Sounds Good to Me." That was when radio sounded good, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So you think that when you're growing up, everybody has this until you visit someone's home, and they might not have what you have at home. You're thinking, you don't have a piano, or you don't have a guitar here, or you don't have no percussion or nothing like that. Where's your drums? Or, you know, it's just not like that once you start visiting other people. It doesn't make them, folks who didn't get into music or art or any type of creative endeavor, doesn't make them less than anyone. You know, my grandfather, his family, they came from St. Kitts. They came to New York. And as he grew in his creative endeavors, I'm just speaking of my grandfather in particular, he wound up becoming this first class, and I say world-class trumpet player. You know, some people can debate me on that. That's fine. It is what it is. He held court with all of those jazz kings and queens of the era. So everybody in that photo, A Great Day in Harlem, he held court with all of them. He knew them, and then they knew him as well. But the only thing was, he was supposed to be in that photo, but his boss wouldn't let him off work. Right. So he missed the photo shoot. And when my cousins and I think my sister were like, when they were younger, because, you know, they were all older than me in terms of a decade or so or whatever, they were younger at the house. They would see these people coming over, but nobody knew they didn't know who they were until my grandfather's passing in 94. And then we're looking on the back of the program and like, what? You know, like, what? When? You know, like, that's who that was. And my older cousin's like, that's who that was coming by the house. So I drew from all of that, you know, even though I'm not a straight ahead jazz musician, because I have a real respect for cats who are just really deeply rooted in that. I mean, I try to be as broad as possible, but it's a whole nother arena that demands a whole nother discipline and respect. It's not like, oh, since I play, I'm adept at what I do, I can play this jazz. Not necessarily, you know what I mean? So you have to approach it with a certain respect and, you know, and reverence, you know, to really execute it properly. And, you know, you can always add on to it. That's the one thing I like about my upbringing with the Jazzmobile program in New York. I don't know if they're still up and running with everything that's been happening across the country, but Jazzmobile was really a cool program for me. It kind of broke me out of my shell.
What was the Jazzmobile program?
It was, when I took it, it was up. They held it at IS 207 East. I think it was East 127th Street. It was IS 101 or something like that. It was a middle school, high school, something like that, or grade school, and in East Harlem. That's where they held their classes in the morning. And I didn't even realize at that time, I don't know if it's relevant to the interview or not, but when I would go to class and I'm walking through the first gate to get into the school, because most of the public schools around the city, Brooklyn, Harlem, they're all designed the same pretty much. When you're walking through the court, and mind you, I'm going here, this is the mid 80s, so this is like 87, you know, fall of 87. I'm walking through the court and I'm walking over all these bodies, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, damn, this is the height of the crack era. I'm aware of it, but I'm not really paying any attention.
Right. Especially in
everybody who's dealing, using, or looking to possibly rob, let's say, a young 16-year-old kid with a fairly expensive instrument, they're all probably sleeping from the night before, whatever the hell they were doing. So I was pretty good. And then I would go from music class to where my introduction to the New York scene really began, which was Shelter Studios on West 37th Street, like the corner between 8th and 9th. It was close to the corner of 8th Avenue. And the gentleman that started that, his name was Steve Missel. And he was a world-class drummer. And the story goes, if I'm wrong and he does see this, you feel free to correct me, but from what I understand, he arranged, possibly composed and arranged the drum parts for Billy Idol's Bright Wedding album. And they paid him a flat fee of like, it's like a 5-figure fee, maybe like 40 G's or something like that. He took that, subsequently took that and opened up his studio. At first it was in this music building, not the one that used to exist on 30th Street that they got rid of. There was another music building closer to the bus depot in the 40s, like West 40th Street or whatever it was. And he had his studio there. Then he found a space on West 37th, moved it there, occupied the top 2 floors. So I would go to that studio because my cousin would rehearse there with her band. She had a female unit band called Feminine Mystique. They rehearsed and did their thing. My cousin, she was a first-class bass player, and then was Donna Travers. And when we ran into each other again at a family gathering, you know, in Jersey at my godparents' house, you know, she knew I was into music, and she told me to come on down and invited me to play with her band, because that's how I learned how to play within a context of the band and know what my role was as a guitar player. And she taught me how to listen. She taught me about, you know, so you got to play that rhythm, you know, so, you know, it's got to be on the one and it's got to be funky, you know, you give them, it's like JB used to tell his crew and tell Bootsy, play all that other stuff, I just need that one.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
You know, and I eventually learned the importance of space and the importance of not playing. Everything doesn't have to be filled up, because in that silence there is I don't know how to put it, like within those there's a space between each note, because if you take time in between each note, that space says a lot too, and it doesn't have to be loud, you don't have to hear anything, but that silence is what's necessary in music a lot too. Everything
right. It definitely carries importance. That silence carries importance. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for
right.
sure.
So everything doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 1, you know, 2, 3, 4, and then on and on. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I learned that, and then of course that sort of ideology, if you will, was enforced by a good friend of mine. His name is Sterling James. He actually took over the guitar spot from Larry Mitchell, who's a world-renowned guitarist and musician, producer, and what have you. He used to let me play his guitar and try out stuff, and he would play something, he'd give me his guitar, and I would play something back, and I played something, and, you know, you young, you think, yeah, that was cool, you know, like, what you think about that? And he just looked at me and he told me outright, he said, you're mowing down too many fucking notes. And I was like, normally a younger individual would have taken it as a slight and not listened to it, but it was something about the way he said that I understood it at that point, and I said, okay, I got it. You know, we as guitar players get impressed by the people we see, you know, which was like, you know, Hendrix, and originally like cats like Hendrix, you know, Eddie Hazel, Funkadelic, you know, Shuggy Otis and Ernie Isley, Jesse Johnson, Mike Hampton from Funkadelic, you know, Bootsy's brother Catfish Phelps, Catfish Collins, who's a phenomenal guitar player, who's still underrated to this day. You know, Johnny Guitar Watson, I can go on and on. But we're impressed with the guys we see who do play with emotion and heart, like you know, Eddie Van Halen, Joe Satriani, and Steve Vai. And we want to go jump right to that, but you have to take it slow first before you can build up to any of that stuff.
Right.
And, you know, most of the times, a lot of musicians think if it's loud and it's overdriven, then that's what it is. But if, you know, if I don't have my effects, then you well, if you didn't have your effects, what would you do? You still got to plug into the amp. You still got to play.
Right. So, you got to put the heart and the soul into it in order to make it great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, it's, you can create different things with different sounds, and that's what they're for. It's just icing on the cake. But if 9 times out of 10, if you got the cake, you don't need the ice. And that's not knocking anybody down or destroying them. So it's just, you know, trying to pass on some things, because I thought that way for a time. I'm like, yeah, I got to do this and have this pedal, and people, what pedals are you using? Nothing. You know, 9 times out of 10, I'm just me and my amplifier turned up in my guitar.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I can use sounds and I like them to flavor certain things. To, you know, as far as that goes, the rest of my upbringing, you know, hanging around and watching Steve Missile rehearse his band, the Rhythm Team. That's how I met Larry Mitchell, and probably trailed Larry and just bugged the hell out of him. And he eventually, you know, to some degree, he had what I call most older musicians would do to young folks that would ask them, you know, whether it was young brothers or sisters or whoever, ask them something about music, trying to learn. And they have that, like I said at one point, that we call it a W.C. Fields thing, like, wait, kid, you're bothering me, you know? You know, so right. I was just like, man, you know, when I would get that, I would just like, at first I got angry about it, but then shortly after that, I just, I figured, I was like, well, look, I'm going to figure this out one way or the other, whether you want to tell me or not. And to a degree, when I look back on it, it's not, sometimes it's, you know, the older sect is either fearful that the younger sect is going to pass them by, or then they will no longer be of any use to anybody, which is how they're treated a lot of times in the business, which is unfortunate because they're needed. You know what I'm saying? We can't discard what they did, because, you know, that path was, you know, that cornfield and stalks was high before they cleared that for us to see, you know, down that path.
Absolutely.
You know, without them, we wouldn't know where to go.
It's the way of the world. I mean, not just in music, but just the way of the world. The old, you know, the ones who came before us can't be discarded, because we're taking the knowledge and we're standing on their shoulders in order to do what we're doing. So yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, you know, quick example, like I pulled into a gas station one time when I was down here, and I had the first Zap CD in the car playing. You know, more bounce to the ounce, and I'm crazy. Right, yeah. Getting it. Young blood brother comes up to me, says, Young Blood looks at me, he says, hey man, yo, hey, what you listening to? Who that dude you listening to? Hey man, who that dude you listening to? Copy and T-Pain. I was like, what? I was like, what did you say? He said, that dude copying T-Pain, man. He doing the same thing. I said, no, young brother. I said, let me show you something. I said, walk with me for a minute. I said, let me show you something. I reached back in my car, pulled out the jewel case. I said, what does this say, brother? He said, oh, it says Zap. I said, all right, flip it back around. I said, what does the back of this say? He said, it says the same thing. I said, no, on the very bottom of it. I said, what does that say? He said, oh, it's a Warner Brothers. I said, what year is it? He said, 1980. I said, dude, T-Pain wasn't even around when like this happened. And I said, and that thing that you're hearing on this record is called the talk box, my dude. I said, T-Pain uses auto-tune. It's a big difference. T-Pain's not a multifaceted musician, at least not to my knowledge. If he is, hey, I stand corrected. As far as I know, Roger Troutman, much like Prince, played several instruments well. And that's the reason those albums sounded the way that they sounded. And I said, dude, you need to check this out, because this is who guy that you like is taking cues from. This is the guy from Tupac, Dr. Dre, California Love, that California, all that stuff you heard, that was him.
That's it.
I said, this is the man that you need to look to. I said, this is the guy. I said, don't, and I told him, I said, now I might not be into T-Pain, but don't drift. If that's what you like, don't discard it. Keep it if that's what you did. I said, do yourself a service, man, and go check this out. You know what I mean? Yes. So doing that's what I always used to do, man. You know, I used to take certain things like that into consideration. And then, you know, jumping back as I'm growing up in New York, Larry Mitchell invites me down to he invited me to several of his gigs during while he was touring and, playing around in the city, should I say.
Mm-hmm.
He subsequently had come back from a major tour in like mid 80s and started rehearsing his band, and then he started working on his solo album, and I was watching him perform around the city. He invites me to the Bitter End for this night of guitars. It's like November of '89, and I come
The
down.
legendary Bitter End, which is still
Oh
around in
yeah,
New York today. Yep.
yeah. That was
Iconic place. Yep.
I grew up there. I grew up in that place, and literally grew up in there. And I come down. I meet Michael Hill for the first time. I saw him play some New York band, local New York band. Can't remember their name. I just remember the gentleman that was playing guitar. He called himself Rick Oblivion. I was like, wow, what a name. I was like, okay. Larry Mitchell played first, actually, and then he introduced Gordon Gaines. Now, before that evening, I was getting all amped up and hyped up. I was listening to the Jimi Hendrix Cry Love album. So the first song on there is Freedom. It's killing. The track's killing. So I'm getting all into it. I'm going to meet up with my two, like my older brothers, these cats are like my brothers. And we meet up at the Bitter End. We get into the Bitter End, and we get seated. And of course, the waitresses are on me because they see I'm young, and they probably think I'm going to try some crazy stuff or order something in dash. And like, the doorman, by the way, his name was Kelly. He had passed away not too long ago. He was real cool, became a really good friend of mine. I went up there, saw this dude, 6'3", this white Polish dude, looked like the Juggernaut. Like, what do you want? I was like, I'm here to see Larry Mitchell. He invited me down. You got ID? I said, look, man, I'm 18. I ain't into no drinking and no alcohol. I ain't trying to sneak nothing. I came here for the music. You ain't got to worry about it. And he looked, he said, yeah, all right, just make sure you don't, whatever. The waitresses are, it's 2 drinks. I mean, they were on it. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. But in any event, Larry Mitchell ends, and then he says, well, stay tuned for Gordon Gaines. He's going to blow your mind. And then Gordon Gaines takes to the stage. And as is before I really got to know him, but when I got to know him, like, just picture Homer Simpson with like otherworldly guitar skills, like that. He's a brother.
Oh wow!
Looks like Homer Simpson, but with otherworldly
that's
guitar
funny.
skills. And sarcastic is all get out, but he steps to the mic and it's like, this is for the man. And he proceeds to play Jimi Hendrix's Freedom. Like, I'm listening to the record all over again, and I'm like, what? I'm like, get out of here.
Wow.
Crazy. And I was like, damn, it's like, that set me back. I was like, I'm either gonna have to really put some extra time to this and really know my stuff, or I'm gonna have to go see if McDonald's is still taking people. Like, there ain't too much room, too many cats after seeing something like that, man. It's either gonna inspire you or it's gonna deter you to just keep. Nothing wrong with a straight job, so I'm not knocking that. So nobody take that the wrong way. I respect everybody that works hard for themselves and family, but if you think you're going to be a musician and you just saw an onslaught of talent like that, you better take it seriously, man. I mean, it is work. It is something that we love to do, but it is work, but you have to put the time into it, man. And I try to do that. And we all have our moments when we're feeling off and don't feel like we're at our best, or we hit some kind of wall. All you got to do is just take a breather, relax for a minute, and then just go back and try to approach it in a different way, which is what Absolutely. I always try to do. But that cat was influential in me, and then that is in turn how I met a lot of the cats who were responsible for the New York music rock scene.
I was going to say, exactly. How did that propel you into who you are today? Seeing something like that mind-blowing experience. Because I know that song, and to play that song, a Hendrix song, that's crazy. That's crazy.
That song is simple yet intricate in so many ways, but right. it's one of his best. To me, it's one of his best songs. Not discounting anything, because Hendrix was an absolute genius, and that song and that album in its entirety just changed my whole scope, because the story behind it, if I'm not mistaken, is he never finished that record. So apparently that record wasn't mixed. Or I was like, if this is a record he did that they put out that wasn't mixed or he didn't finish it, I'm like, that's insane. So insane. I would have like been completely blown out of my spirit to hear what he really intended, because he didn't finish this particular record. And I'm like, it's crazy, because he was not just a great, a lot of people just focus on his guitar prowess, and I dug his vocals.
Vocals are crazy too,
He wasn't the greatest singer. No, it's not.
No.
Sometimes you don't have to be the greatest singer, but it's your delivery and the emotion behind it. And that's what I got out of that. And then in the New York scene, when I started meeting my friend Andrea Green, she was the guitar player of her band called Mascara. They were the only female rock band, women of color, Black women, doing this at the time. There was no other power trio on the scene, to my knowledge, doing what they were doing. And it was crazy. I mean, they went from rock to funk to just reggae. It was bananas. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, and watching them open shows at Wetlands and Tramps, seeing them open for Living Color. That's how I met those guys in Family Stand. You know, that's how I met B. Jeffrey Smith and Myra Singer. My uncle just passed, Ronnie Drayton, Mooney. He was the guitar player in the band. Rocky.
Listen, man, I'm lucky to have some of these people come through One Mic Night and experience those people myself. You know, that's crazy.
They whether they knew it or not, I periodically drop messages on some of them, and I just tell them thank you. You know, because a lot of times after a show, you got so many people coming up to you and you're having all these side conversations after the show. You know, you can't register every conversation that you have. So I'm mindful of that. That's why when I meet somebody, if they have a big name, 9 times out of 10, if I say, hey, what's happening, man? How you doing? And they just rush past, I don't really take offense to it, because I'm like, you know what? I don't know how many people you done encountered throughout the course of the day. I'm not sure, you know, how many meetings you might have had to have taken before you start pre-production on a film, before you had to go start a soundtrack or whatever. You might be mapping out what you have to do for this project that you have a specific deadline for. If you come off a stage to a show, 9 times out of 10, it made me understand. If you listen to that old Bobby Womack tune, That's the Way I Feel About it. No, not That's the Way I Feel. I can't remember it right now. He's talking in the beginning of it, and he's mentioning this, like, because of contracts and schedules, you know. And no, it's called He'll Be There, you know. And he mentions this very same thing, because a lot of times you might have to come right off stage, go right to the bus, and maybe that one person that really was touched and really just wants to say, hey, how you doing? Just thank you. I'm gonna say thank you. Could you possibly take a picture with me, or maybe sign an autograph? And you might not be able to do that, because you gotta leave right at that moment, because you gotta get into the next town, check in. Hopefully you'll have like at least that next day off, and then you got your sound check, all that stuff, whatever else, and the promoter and all of that stuff. So 9 times out of 10, we see the show, we just paid for the show, but we don't see all the other stuff. So, man, I tried to say hi to such and such. The hell with them. But you realize they had to get on in a bus or a town car or a limo to go right to the airport, because they got to fly right to Paris.
Exactly.
They got to go right to the radio station. Hopefully they'll get some sleep, and then they gotta go do a show, and then come back, do another in-store, and then maybe get some sleep, and then they got 3 more shows after that before they go from Paris back to, you know, Detroit, and then come back and do things all over again. Sometimes it just works down there. And
I want to say 2 quick things. One, shout out, like we were just talking about all those bands. Shout out to the Family Stand. Shout out to B. Jeffrey Smith, who used to come through One Mic Night every week. Shout out to Sandra St. Victor, who came through one night and blew the roof off. You can check that video out on the One Mic Night YouTube page. And shout out to Corey Glover from Living
Yeah, of
Color, who
course.
actually got OneMicNite kicked out of its first spot because he blew the roof off of that place, and I had to move it to another spot. So
Yeah,
please
man.
go check those guys out.
Yeah, man. Corey, phenomenal talent, man. It's
Phenomenal.
ironic that I trailed him somewhat, I guess I would say academically, or
Hmm.
because I went to Borough Hall Academy, which Brooklyn Tabernacle has taken over that building on Smith Street and the subsequent theater that used to be on Fulton.
Okay.
Um, and he left there and wound up going to Julie Richmond, and then I wound up going to Julie Richmond. I had one of his same teachers, so I told him that. I was like, I was wisecracking in class.
That's
Teacher's like,
funny.
"You're just like Corey Glover." I was like, "What?" You know. So one time I got a chance to tell him that, we just sat back and laughed at it. But cats like him, and I gotta give acknowledgement to Melvin Gibbs and DK Dyson, who have founded the group I. Like a lot of people in the area in Brooklyn and around, they know about that group. That was a very underrated group. Them, Richie Harrison, Andy LaSalle, my man, my big brother Gary Paulson. He was the original guitar player in there, and then Andy LaSalle came in later on. Richie Harrison, he was the drummer, phenomenal producer in his own right.
Mhm.
The circle was really small because a lot of times when I found out who we all knew when I was a younger guy, the older guys didn't want to look bad trying to punk the young kids. They go get their little brothers to try to fight me. And one of the guys I used to tussle with wound up being Gary Paulson's nephew, and I found that out later. It was like, what? I was like, so we were really all like this,
Right. I was
and
going
we
to say,
didn't
what was the
really know
community
it,
like?
you know?
Yeah.
And
What was
it's
the New York
funny
scene like?
because cats like Jabril Toure, phenomenal bass player, that plays a lot with Jerome Jordan and Ramsey Jones, the drummer. Ramsey's a phenomenal drummer. Ramsey's family is RZA and ODB. That's his family. You know what I mean? So a lot of times when RZA does his shows and Jizz and those cats decide to do shows, they always call in that hit squad of, Entrified McLeod, Ramsey Jones, Jerome Jordan, Jabril Toure. That's the hit squad for them. And
Mm.
Jabril grew up down the block from me, back in the day. And I always see this cat sitting on the step, playing, not saying much, but he was taking his thing seriously, man. And he turned out to be one of a fine musician. So cats like that, I was fortunate enough, a lot of them, to see them start and see them grow, even though I was the guy mainly in the cut. You didn't see me at a lot of
Right.
places.
Yeah.
I was a square. I didn't do a lot of things most people did, and I don't know. I'd rather just be right here.
Right. But that's okay because you were there and you still
Yeah,
picked up all the knowledge and all the things that were going on at the time.
absolutely,
And that's it.
absolutely,
That's important.
absolutely, and that's what made the city great. And it's unfortunate to me, New York. You go to different countries or places, and people know that you're from there, grew up there. They're so intrigued with it, and that's not discount any place else in the states. Not Minneapolis has its own culture.
Right.
Dayton, Ohio, with Cincinnati, spawned all those great musicians, and
Sure.
Minneapolis not only was home to Prince and Alexander O'Neal and Jimmy and Terry and all those cats, but Husker Du, the Replacements, another great band that didn't really get the shine they deserved was called Ipso Facto. And you got all these places, but when people find out you're from New York, it's supposed to be the front runner in arts and culture, but they're so quick to take away these venues where all this
Yeah.
stuff
Right.
really emanates. And it seems sometimes like you only want it, it's only deemed legitimate unless it's at the Met or Lincoln Center or
Right.
Carnegie Hall. And no knock to those venues, but I'm like, you can't, put a leash on, creativity. Joe Bowie came from St. Louis, I believe, to New York. And in the late 70s, early 80s, this man single-handedly changed and breathed life into the Bowery scene. And in that band, which was defunct, all of these great players like Kelvin Bell, Melvin Gibbs was the original bass player there. You know, I think his brother Byron Bowie was in there. His older brother Lester Bowie was a staple and icon in the jazz scene and jazz circles.
Yeah, right. You're right.
You know, so these guys came from this town, you know, these brothers, and they changed the face of it. A lot of times when people mention CBGBs of the Bowery, someone did a documentary, a reporter from, I don't know what magazine, I won't mention it, even if I do remember it, you know, did this montage of all these bands, like, I guess, New York Dolls or the Sex Pistols or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're talking about that scene, how you gonna leave out Defunct? How you gonna leave out Living Color? How you gonna leave out I or Wayne Livingston, who's another Brooklyn native, had a band called Shop Council. This other cat named Damon Mendes had a band in New York City, power trio, man, called August Cross. Man, I saw them at the bitter end, comprised of Booker King, Damon Mendes. I can't remember the guitar player's name. He was a phenomenal player. And the lead singer, cannot remember this brother's name, but he looked like Terrence Trent D'Arby, I kid you not. But he could sing, like he was phenomenal. And I saw all of this unfold at the bitter end. All of these bands come from all these different places, from rock and roll, blues, country, electronic, funk, soul, you name it, including brother Paul Malloy. You know, we call him, his band was PM in the New Breed, and Mary Harris was the original drummer for that band. And I saw all of these people just come in and just create, make it happen. And they went on to other things, great things. Right. And that influenced me to want to just kind of have put my little small stamp on it, or have, you know, my little imprint on it, what I could do as a up and coming player, you know. So I do my best, you know, these days to teach whatever I know to whoever is interested. And that's the way it continues, because you can't take it with you. And right. I've said it before, if you don't siphon out what's in the picture, you can't add to it. So you're not going to learn nothing else.
And it's too important to lose. And somebody has to teach it. Where do you see the New York music scene now? Do you think we're in a post-COVID period? Do you think it'll bounce back? Some of these venues have closed. What's happening now? What's the future of music and the scene here, the live music scene?
It's honestly, my honest answer, sometimes I feel like, no. I've seen other people, because certain things have opened up, or eateries or restaurants are opened up partially. I've seen other people outside having a chance to play after so long, and people do appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I don't really foresee it going back. For some odd reason, when I did my last gig in the city, I turned around and I could just see everything still, you know, almost like that scene in that old Tom Cruise film, Vanilla Sky.
Right.
And the whole street was empty. And I was just like, I'm not trying to sound deep. I'm prophetic. I'm not Nicodemus. You know what I mean? I don't predict nothing, but you know, Most High just hit me and had this feeling. I turned around. I was like, man, this ain't gonna last. And I was ready to roll up out the city anyway. And I didn't feel nothing, you know, against any. I'm not upset with anyone by any means. You know, I didn't feel that same sense of camaraderie to lift, you know, your next person up. I saw a lot of competition, and in saying that, I saw, you know, a few musicians that had a residency at a local nightclub in the village. I won't say which one it was, and they were trying to berate this cat I knew who played in the subway, and I've known this guy since 92, 93. Been playing 9 times out of 10. You can see him in the tunnel on the uptown side of West 4th. So on an average night, the average club holds about 150, let's say 200 people. If the person's getting charged $15, $20 to come in, and 9 times they're coming in because they hear the music's good, they're going to take interest, they're going to stop. And even if they were just curious and just wanted to hear, they'll stand outside for a minute. Doorman said, why don't you go in and check it out, you know? sometimes they don't charge. They go down, 9 times out of 10, they stay. But even the people, let's say the average folks that come in and they do pay $15, $20 to come, you sitting down, you got to fulfill that drink minimum, and then, you know, food and all of that. And then if they really dig the band, they're going to bless the band with, you know, some dough on top of what the band's getting, which is, I mean, it's not the public's business, but they're going to put a lot of love in that bucket.
Right.
You
Yeah.
dig?
Yeah, sure.
And I've seen that time and time again. Now, some of the guys and few of the guys in some situations trying to scoff at this cat in the train station. I said, well, I know for a fact this particular cat on a good week or, you know, night, if he has a week of good nights, he'll make $150, you know, times 5 or 6, because sometimes it's down there 6 nights. Right. So 150 times 6, you do the math. He's doing better than you are because you don't have to split nothing with nobody. Right. So again, if you're taking the whole lion's share of the money, that who's really winning here? Because don't look at it because you're not in an environment that's not a club environment. He doesn't have to answer to the club owner. Owner, there was no club owner, any middleman that's ever going to determine
no middleman
what he's going to make.
That's right.
Okay. So,
and on top of that, he makes his own hours. So he goes when he wants to. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked at him and I just said, well, who's winning now?
That's right.
And then they kind of got a little quiet. And I said, okay,
there
you know, perception is everything now, isn't it? I said, just because you're in here getting a check, and I'm not mad at that. It's good that you get that exposure, get your chops, you know, keep your chops tight. But who's really winning out in the end? It's almost sort of like the old interview that Tavis Smiley once did with Prince, Shaka Khan, and Larry Graham on BET. And Prince made a statement, but Larry Graham reiterated, and he had his new album at the time. He said, you know, if I sold 100,000 copies of this at a record company, would say that's a flop. He said, but if I sell 100,000 copies of this right now, he said, I done made $700,000.
Right.
Really?
There you go.
As opposed to you generating $5 million for a record company, and then you only getting 1 or a third of a cent per record.
Right.
And you wind up with, you know, what? 200, or no, let's say you wind up with $175,000 after everybody done took a piece of it. But this guy just made 700,000, you know.
700,000 right there. That's it.
Business. So
listen, man, we got to end on this note. Yeah, you know? Yeah, we got to end on this note, and I appreciate your time. Tell everybody how we can find you on social media.
Kyle S. Christian on Facebook. On IG, it is Mr. Christian himself. Yeah. And we'll be starting lessons pretty soon for those who are interested. So you want to learn, and you know, I'm willing to teach you, and you know, teach you whatever it is that I know that can help you be a better musician.
There you go. Even
better than me, you know.
That's right. You're gonna do them virtually too?
Yeah, I'm gonna start doing some online classes pretty soon. So anyone can check my IG page. My Facebook page is pretty easy, you know, Kyle S. Christian, nothing complicated. Just trying to do something different and give back, you know, the best I can, and which will help me learn in turn. So that's where we are. And, you know, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, man, and that's why I had you here, because that's what you do. You give back all the time. You're so humble about your experience. I appreciate it.
You like the old man talk too much, don't he?
No, not at all.
Stick to one thing, you know?
I want to thank you for joining me here on One Mic Night. Everybody, please make sure you follow Kyle on all the social media. And you can follow us at One Mic Night. One Mic Night is spelled ONEMICNITE on all the social media. Go to the .com and click on the links. You can find all the social media tabs. You can also follow me at Marcos Luis, MARCOSLUIS. Let me know what you think about this show, and also go down to the comment section, make a comment about the episodes that you like or anything you want to talk about. This is One Mic Night, the podcast. I appreciate you for joining me and sharing these episodes. See you next time.
Awesome.
Once again, I want to thank Kyle Christian for joining me here on One Mic Night. Kyle is truly one of the greats, and his confidence is immeasurable. Please make sure you follow him on all social media. And thank you for joining me for this episode of One Mic Night. Make sure you follow us and like us on Facebook. We're creating an artist collective community where you can go and find music gigs, acting gigs, actors, the whole thing for entertainment. This episode is brought to you by Azule's Art. You might see some of the artwork in the background of the One Mic Night videos. And it's art for sale. Azule's painter, Neil Polanco, Dominican painter, will be on One Mic Night Podcast coming up soon, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. This episode is available now on YouTube for the visual. So go to One Mic Night on YouTube, OneMicNite. Thank you for joining me for One Mic Night.